Hi, and thank you for joining us for this episode of The State of Leadership Simple and Beyond. That is a Robert Hilliard. I am Whitney Wiley, and we are here on Thursdays talking all things leadership, 3 p.m. Eastern, 12 noon Pacific. And today we're talking about the inevitable. We're talking about change. And we're talking about the transition that is a part of change and an important part that is often overlooked. And we'll be talking about it from the William Bridges transition model, the change and transition model. And you have Robert to thank for this topic today. I it's actually one of my favorite topics. So when you mentioned it, I was glad that you brought it up. We've talked about change on the program before. Change is always happening. So even in programs that are not specifically about change, we're talking about change because it is just a part of what's happening in organizations and in people in systems all the time, right?
Absolutely. And when we think about systems, well, let me backtrack. We often don't think about systems. We usually think, I'm here, the change is affecting me, or the company's here, the change is affecting the company. And because of that, I have to do something. But we have to look at it from a broader perspective.
Yeah.
A change in one part of the system will create changes down the line in other parts of that system. And we've talked about this in one of our webinars that change is like a big spider web, and when something happens on one end of that spider web, it vibrates down all the way through that whole network of webs. So change affects everything.
Absolutely. I think of it also, the spider webs is a good analogy, but ripples in a pond
Mhm.
or waves in the ocean, right? If you make a push or you drop something in, it has an effect that cascades out.
Right.
And some change, right? You think about oceans, something that happens on the other side of the world, an earthquake creates underwater currents and whatnot, and can have an effect half a world away
Sure.
because of the rolling nature and the continuing impact on other systems, ecosystems, environments, etc., along the way.
Yeah. And I think it's really important as we look at, we don't do politics on the show, but there's been a political change here. And so I think it's really important that we talk about this so we can put people maybe can look at that as one aspect of it, and how what's going on in the country is affecting other subsystems within the country. So we're not being political, but we're just talking about how what goes on will affect other parts of the system and other systems that are connected to it.
Absolutely. And so to that degree, and you want to talk about what changes, what trend, right? Just sort of give a brief definition, and then oh shoot, I had a thought and it flew right out of my head. So while you're doing that, maybe it'll come back.
It will. So change is the outside of us effect. It's something that happens to us. It could be um, your boss telling you you're going to take on a new project. You're being voluntold to do something. That certainly is a change. It could be your organization being broken up into many different parts. That is a change. It could be an organization merging with another organization. That, of course, is a change. So it's all those outer things that happen. Transition is the psychological or emotional effect of that change. We cannot typically control changes, or I should put it better, changes are more often out of our control unless we are the ones that are initiating that change. And sometimes even that, because of the ripple effect, can get out of our control, right? Think of, nuclear chain reactions and things like that. However, we can deal with and control transition. how it affects us. We can come up with plans to do that because that's a more of a micro level, not a macro level.
Very nice. And so the thought that flew out of my head as a part of that, a subset of that, is internal versus external.
Yes, absolutely. Change is external, transition is internal, right? Because usually when something happens in an organization or in a system, what we look at is how it affects us, how it is, what this is happening to me, right? And so, and a lot of times the person that is or the system or the event, if we look at things from a natural standpoint, like nature is not personally targeting you, right? So when there's a hurricane in your, part of the country, nature is not going, hey, Whitney, I'm going to go send this hurricane to your house. It just happens. But we tend to think of it as, this is happening to me. This change is directed at me. You just happen to be part of the system that the change is affecting.
And it's interesting because there's a mindset component that goes along with that. We're not necessarily digging deep into that, except as it relates to, how as leaders we can help those who are part of our teams acknowledge the change, right? Help them in letting go, and we'll start to get into the model itself and the components of that. But acknowledging what's happening and letting go, and sometimes the just in life, right? That mindset piece is if we see things as happening to us rather than it's happening, and what is my self-efficacy in order to accept what is happening and then make decisions that move me along with the change. Right, it creates resistance, and that resistance creates problems for us, problems for the system, for the team, etc. And so it is a leader's job to help, one, to acknowledge what the phases are as part of this process for the leader, him or herself, and then just as importantly for the remainder of the team, right? The remainder of those who are impacted by the change, because if they can't help them through, then that resistance can become a barrier, a roadblock to getting to the other side.
Right. And I want to just put a fine point on something that you said. Resistance to change, we're talking about the mindset that change is happening, right? Because sometimes resistance to a change is actually an action that you might want to take, but we don't want to resist the thought that the change is happening sometimes. And that's part of when we think about change and things that occur to us, we tend to, you and I do this all the time, and I believe that this was part of the whole conversation with the William Bridges model, that we overlap the Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's stages of grief on top of that. So denial will be that first stage in resisting a change. It's like, oh, this is not happening. When your eyes are telling you, your senses are telling you that it is happening, that is not helpful. So that's what we mean by resistance to change. Sometimes the action you take could be resistance to that change. It could be going along with that change. It could be working around that change. But we'll talk about that a little bit later on.
And so let's get into the model.
Yeah, let's get into the model
and talk about the phases.
Yeah, so the model is very interesting. And one of the reasons why I love this model and prefer it over others is because it's fairly easy to understand. So you have three phases. You have letting go phase. That is letting go of the way things were. He gives it three names: ending, losing, letting go. whatever you prefer. It's one of those three. You can call it either one of those, any one of those. And it's really letting go of the old way,
Yeah.
and accepting that the change is actually taking place. So that phase, it's very straightforward, right? The second phase is the neutral zone. That is that in between phase, that foggy phase where the old way is gone, but the new way hasn't really taken hold yet. You haven't fully accepted, and you certainly don't know what to do in the with the new way. So that's the neutral zone. It's that fogginess. That's you really can't let go. You're in the you're in the change, the transition, but you really can't let go of the old way. You're still yearning for the way things were. Sometimes our parents you hear your parents saying, back in my day, I wish things were the way they were. That's something that's an indicator that somebody is in the neutral zone, or they're dipping their toe back into the neutral zone. And then you have the new
Wait,
beginning.
before you go on, and I know you said we're not going to talk politics, and we don't talk politics, right? It's that's for another time, another place. But there is very much a lot of that happening,
Oh
right?
yeah.
And so we have to recognize that, and it is probably an impetus for a lot of what people are feeling. I've been, I feel quite fortunate that my social media feeds tend to be quite positive. Um, and it's a nature of the people who, for the most part, are a part of my community, various communities, the people that I am connected to. They are of a particular mindset, energy, vibrational, you know, environments. Um, but there, here and there are some people, and there are moments where, whether it's on, it happens on LinkedIn, much more frequently on Facebook, I would say, that there are people who very much I can tell are in a, this needs to be like it was in the good old days, right? Whenever the good old days were, which is part of the challenge, because what was the good old days for one person is not necessarily the good old days for another. And it's so in this country, in the state, in your state, in families, in companies, right? It's the same thing. People are yearning for what was, or the way it used to be, or that's not how it was when I started, or whatever, right? That is part of that resistance, right? And you can, how do I want to put this? There's nothing wrong with enjoying what was, but if it starts to affect your ability to be in the here and now, and to work with what is, and have a positive impact on what is currently, you're creating problems. And after you finish the rest of this, I'll share a story from an organization I was in, that and that was very much the challenge there.
Yeah. And that's that's all very important what you said, Whitney, and we'll loop back to that. The very last phase of William Bridges' model is the new beginning, and that is when the new uh, change has taken hold. Um, Most, if not all, people in the system are working with the change, and you've accepted it. You're moving forward with it. A lot of times when we look at these as when somebody's instituting a positive change into an organization, or something at least they think is going to be good for the organization. I'll say it that way. Most people are working at that point. That's when you're in the new beginning. Something to remember, and I want to bring this up now because I tend to leave it out of the conversation, is something called the marathon effect. If you're a leader and you're pushing that change along, if you're the one that conceived of this change, whether it's a new program you're bringing into your organization, new software you're bringing into this organization, hardware, whatever processes, you've had a longer time to go through these phases than the people you are introducing the change to. So the marathon effect is when there's a marathon, you have thousands of people. You don't put the slow runners up in the front. You put the people with the better times up in the front. So they're going to finish the race well before the people all the way in the back. We know that people can run a marathon in just over 2 hours. That would not be me. It would probably take me 4 days to do a marathon, but I'm a sprinter, not a distance runner. So that's the marathon effect. Realize that if you're a leader and you're initiating the change, or you're bringing the change into your organization or into your system, you've had more time to get acclimated to the system, to the change, and you need to let other people catch up to you.
I want to add just a little something to that, and it is, even if the change somehow was sprung on you, right? Whether from on high or something external came in, the fact that you have, generally, as you are in leadership and the higher up you are in your organization, more information, more context about things that are happening or potentially could happen, that also gives you sort of that leg up, right? And it is, I would say, challenging and maybe a little disheartening to expect that people who don't have the advantage that you have of knowledge, information, time in a process, to expect them to be where you are in the process. And it's just something to keep in mind, that you have to meet the members of your team where they are as you're going through the process.
You know, I couldn't have said that better. And each phase of the Bridges model has certain symptoms and solutions for each phase, things that you should do, or I should say actions instead of solutions. And sometimes we forget that instead of just accepting the change, you need to learn how to work with others while they are experiencing that change. And if you don't, you're just setting yourself up for failure.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So why don't we dig in a little bit and go into the phases? We talked about some of the challenges of each phase and how to help your people through.
Yeah, let's do that. So let's take a look at endings. And, the first step to really dealing with that part of the model, that phase, is to understand when people are going through it. When you are experiencing, or people are experiencing denial, they did not, I can't believe this is happening. This can't be happening to me. Anger, they're angry about it. And quite, I just want to just put a fine point on this. Anger is a lot better than fear. I mean, better than denial, because at least they're recognizing that it's happening, but they're still in that endings phase. And then you have fear. And also another symptom is status. People worried about their status. How is this going to affect me? I like to use the example of changing a piece of software, or an application that people are using. And you may have someone in your organization or in your department that is an expert in that particular software. Other people go to them from your department, people from the outside of your department go to them to get tips, to get knowledge. And then you tell that person, we're not going to use that ever again. We're going to get this brand new piece of software, and they're going to have to learn that from square one. So they're worried about their status. Maybe that person was not an executive in your organization, but that the fact that they were an expert in that particular software gave them a type of status that really helped them see themselves as higher than their position. So those are symptoms of that particular phase, the endings phase of William Bridges' model.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. You talked about it's that fear of letting go, the resistance to, or the grief that they're attaching to the old way of doing things, or who they are as part of this system or this organism. And I think back to a particular you talk about status. I was in an office. I worked for, I won't name the entity, but it was a state organization that I worked for at the time. And this was a simple change, or one would think. We were moving, right? We were in sort of outgrown the space that we were in, and were looking to move to new office space. And so there was a team that was set up to do that, and they did all the planning, the facilities planning, and as they were assigning office space, right, the jockeying for position for who was going to get which space, and the size of the offices, and whether or not there were lights in the corner office, and the cubicle for those people who were going to end up in cubicles, what size those cubicles, and how they open to traffic lanes, and all of those things. And so while everyone was actually excited about the move, there was still this part of, am I going to lose something that I currently have? Right? Am I going to lose the status that I have with my office space, and who's going to be in the farthest corner, and all of that? So even when it is something that you're looking forward to, you can still have, right, these emotions that are a part of the process, because you're letting go of something that for certain, even if you don't like it particularly, you're familiar with it, and you have to let go of that in order to get to the new thing.
Absolutely. Just think about that. You're moving from one location to another. There's new equipment, most likely. There's going to be a new office layout. There is probably going to be new furniture. There's going to be quite possibly, more or less space. So all of these things, they look, this is really funny. The last time I did this workshop, I started off, it was a physical, wasn't virtual. I started off, I usually have some kind of, I don't like icebreakers, because icebreakers typically don't have anything to do with the workshop. So I don't usually use them. If I have something in the beginning, it's connected to the workshop. I'm very strict about that. So I let everybody get comfortable. I was sitting at this conference table, and I said, is everybody comfortable? And they were like, yes. Okay, what I want you to do is I want you to look at the person across from you and switch places with them. That's going to be your permanent, your new spot. And the groaning and grumbling that caused, I let it happen. And I said, now, that was something that took you 30 seconds to do at most. Imagine when you have a really big change. And they were like, we get it. And that's how we started the workshop. Just that little itty bitty change was enough for them to go, because they were like, I like the seat. I sit here because it was a workshop for people within that particular office.
And it's interesting you mention that, because one of the things that I pay attention to when I train, and I have multiple day trainings, is who changes where they sat from the first day, right? Do
Absolutely.
people sit in the same place with the same people each and every day, or do they
Move
switch
around.
up,
Mhm.
right? And we have a conversation about that.
Absolutely.
Because for me, it is one of those things that's important in terms of self-awareness, right? Which is part of our model, the simple leadership method and framework is self-awareness. Are you always going back to the thing that you're comfortable with? Because the whole thing with change and transition is that it you're going to go through the discomfort, but that's where the growth is. And that's how you get to the other side. And so stopping to just think about what your habits are, what your patterns are going to uh, be available for you when something larger is happening. Whether or not you sit in the same seat every day for a 3-day training is no big deal, right? But it's indicative of your patterns and how you accept change in other situations.
Absolutely. Let's talk a little bit about solutions for the endings phase of the model. So, one of the things that you want to do as a leader is you want to give as much detail as you can about the
Mhm.
change. That's really important. A lot of times, leaders like to hoard information. I don't know why they do that, but give that information out. Let people know.
Information is power,
Oh,
Robert. You
I
know
know
that.
that, but power in that case, you want that power to be shared with other people. You don't you don't want it to work against you. So you want to share it, as much as you can. There may be some confidential things that you can't share, of course. Don't share those things, but let them know the things that you can share. Let them know what they will be losing. That's really important. Like who is going to lose what. You used to do it this way. You're not going to be doing that anymore. And when that's going to be phased out, really important. Um, you want to identify what the whole group is going to lose. Like maybe individuals will lose certain things, certainly status, but maybe the group is going to lose something. And you certainly want to deal with the emotions. You want to deal with, you want to be empathetic, and you want to show a concern. Because in order for people to work through that, you need to allow them to feel that you are empathizing with them.
Absolutely, right? You're validating those emotions. I understand how you feel, or and ask some questions, right?
Yeah,
Don't make assumptions about how people feel, but take the time to actually ask questions so that you can understand where they are, so that you can support them and help them and validate what they're feeling, and you know ultimately help them through as we talk through the rest of the model.
yeah. Um, let's go to the neutral zone. The neutral zone is very interesting because this is that it's the I would say the nowhere space between two somewheres. So confusion, right? People not knowing what to do. Um, Reemergence of old issues, like people are they'll try to hold on to the past so much so they'll bring up old issues, right? So you want to be mindful of that. Increased absenteeism is another thing that you're going to see as people they just can't deal with the change, right? They're just so frustrated with the new changes. Maybe they're not getting the new computer program that you installed. They can't learn it as they need to take a mental health day. um, and then you'll notice this in when we look at it as far as groups are concerned, people taking sides for and
Mm.
against the change. You'll see that. You'll have those factions starting to form. That's how you're going to know that you're in the neutral zone. I always think of Star Trek whenever I think of the neutral zone.
I think one of the things that's important here is if you have lots of change going, particularly organizationally implemented, instituted change, and you are starting processes that don't get completed, or the way they were handled in the past may not have been the best, that you're going to need to be open to the increased sort of uncertainty and chaos that goes along with that, and people taking sides or forming alliances or factions, right? Particularly if you've got old guard, young guard, or veteran guard, young guard, newer people who haven't been through those experiences in the past, right? Maybe they don't have the attachment that those who have been around longer have, who've been through, you know, starts and stops, failed change processes, and as they're, as you said, bringing up things from the past, they're bringing up things that some people don't have any knowledge about, right? Which can create other problems. And so paying attention to all of that becomes really important.
Yeah, absolutely. Some solutions for the neutral zone, and this is the first one is really weird, is let people understand, like help them understand the neutral zone. I'm going to suggest that as a leader, you don't call it the neutral zone. Just say you're going to go through a period of confusion. This happens in every change. Don't call it the neutral zone. I call it the neutral zone when I'm teaching it because it is part of the model. But when you're just having that conversation, you don't need to call it the neutral zone. So let them help them understand it. Help them understand that the confusion and fogginess that they're experiencing is normal. It is part of change, and it's to be expected. You want to design some workarounds, some short-term solutions. Not very, very rarely when we install things, that they work the way we envision them at first. So you may have to install some short-term workarounds until those kinks and bugs are worked out. You want to build group unity because you want to get rid of those factions, because you'll have those, for and against. You want to get people, for lack of a better term, singing from the same hymnal. Another thing you'll hear a lot of rumors popping up. You want to correct them.
Yeah.
You want to put the truth out there. Don't let the rumors take hold. And while people are going through this nebulous time, you want to encourage them to be creative. If things aren't working the way that they were envisioned, allow them to be creative with it. It will take that energy, that anxiety they have, and put it to use for you as a leader and for the team.
Absolutely. I went through a reorg, and I've shared various parts of this story in the past. But I think this aspect, I don't think I've shared this. And through the process, once the decision was made to go in a particular direction, as we're in this sort of in between space, the consultant, formed focus groups of varying compositions. Some were departmental, some were more by position. There were, some various ways to talk with employees to start sort of addressing the concern, the very real concerns and resistance that was happening around the change, and the concern of the direction. But he also provided some opportunity to, not just ask questions, but to offer up solutions, right? To give us the chance to be creative about how to make what was going to be happening work. And the real challenge in that situation was, very few people thought that it was going to work. And in fact, it didn't work. But he did, at least as a consultant, he recognized the need to give, to empower employees, I think, with the opportunity to say, this isn't the recommendation that I had, but this is the direction that leadership has decided to go. Therefore, what can we do? What processes can we put in place to try to address the concerns that you have moving forward? Unfortunately, some of those things weren't addressed, and a year or so down the line, there was a new consultant that came along that had to clean up right, some of what didn't work out of the initial process. But I think the bottom line is that there is an opportunity to not just express frustration, to be in these factions, but to play a role in what can we do? How can we make this actually work on an individual basis and a collective basis?
Yeah, and it starts with listening, right? A lot of times people don't like to listen to people's complaints about a change, or maybe you call it griping about the change, but it's really important to listen to those things because you're going to learn something. You may need to limit the amount of griping, complaining, or grousing you listen to, but you should listen to it because you can learn a lot from it. So it's really important. Let's talk about
I agree. I love it. Can I just add this one
Sure.
thing? Because I think that your point is certainly well taken. And as I think back on that process, I know I've shared this, that I had conversation with one of the members of leadership at the time, and there was very much an attitude of, we've decided to go in this direction. You guys just need to accept it, right? You just need to accept it. But I will say that again, at least with the consultant, and early on, there was wide berth for people to say what they felt like they needed to say. And while it wasn't unlimited in that, we got to complain about it for 4 months, there wasn't an attempt in at least a couple of the early meetings to try to stop people. It's like, let's just get it all out. Just get it all out. And once you felt that you've said everything, now it's like, okay, you've made your point, you've said your piece, we hear you, right? At least the consultant said, we hear you. And as someone who was advising the leadership team of how to make this work, taking that information, right? Because resistance is information, right? It's feedback. And so taking that and saying, here are the concerns that are being communicated. And because I think a lot of the concerns were consistent across departments and across positions, it wasn't like it was just people complaining for the sake of complaining. And I think that's important. So giving people that space, again, like you said, not unlimited, but enough so that they can truly feel like they've been heard, is an important part of that process.
Absolutely. So let's talk about some of the symptoms of the new beginning. So here's where you're going to see some forward momentum. You're going to see things are starting to move along in the direction that you envision, or at least forward. It may be askew a little bit, but it's moving forward. There'll be some excitement there. There'll be confidence, but you want to be mindful. There's going to be some fear as well, even though there's excitement, because excitement and fear, they're very closely related a lot of times, right? When we talk to people and we coach people, when they say, I'm nervous, it's like, well, that's also can be excitement. There's a relationship there with those two things. And the reason why there may be some fear is because people will remember that the old way was once the new way at some point. What's going to happen down the line? Are we going to have to go through this again? Now that I'm getting really good at this, hey, I have an affinity with this program too. Maybe I'm going to be an expert, again. Are we going to change again? So remember, that's not uncommon to experience just a bit of fear along with the excitement, because people are going to remember that like I said before, the old way was once the new way.
Yeah. It's such a good point to remember. And in every sphere that you're in, right? To think about that. And there's in a more, I don't want to say religious term, but there's a meme that says, "You once prayed for what you have now," right? And right, and so you have to be careful. Be careful. So,
Send me that meme. That's hilarious. I got a bunch of people I want to send it to. Okay, so let's talk about some solutions. In the new beginnings, this is where you want to take that excitement and that energy and put it to use. You want to explain your outcomes. Like, okay, now that we're moving in the right direction, here's the vision, right? You may have to remind them of what the vision was when you instituted the change. Maybe that vision has altered, but you want to put it out there so people know, okay, now that I have some momentum, this is where we're going. I'm not just running in place. We're moving forward. That's really important. You want to give, and for those people that get to, remember, not everybody gets to new beginnings at the same time. Your team will not all trot along and get there at the same time. You're going to have some people, that are, how should I say this, still in the endings phase. You're going to have some people in the neutral zone, and you'll have your early adopters. That's what we call those people. Give those people, your early adopters, give them something to do. So if you have people, we're using that computer program example, they're getting really good at that. Let them train other people so that they're not getting bored and frustrated that they're, already accepting the new way and other people are dragging their feet. So those are some solutions for dealing with the new beginning.
right. And when you get there, celebrate, right? You need to celebrate the
Really
success,
important.
celebrate the wins that are a part of that. And it not just the process, but the people who help to move that process along, right? And to letting them know that you appreciate, not that they caved or anything like that, but that they are a part of helping other people to acclimate to what is the new what is and how you're going to continue to move forward.
Absolutely. And it's so important. And when I I'm getting tongue tied because I love this model so much, because when we were studying this, I don't know if you remember, there were like 7 different models that we were looking at.
Yes.
And I remember looking at some of them going, I can see what the person that created that was thinking. It just wasn't resonating with me. But when I saw this, it made total sense. And one of the things that I loved about this is when William Bridges talks about putting together the transition monitoring team, to me, that was a stroke of genius. And so I think the last part of this is really talking about your transition monitoring team and what it does. Your transition monitoring team is a group of people from different levels in your organization or in your system that work on a limited basis. This is not a team that's going to live infinitum. They're going to be just part of this change initiative. And what they help you do is they will funnel information back up to you. So as you're putting the change in place, that team is telling you how it is being received and perceived by the people on the front lines. You can then use that information to make changes and to address concerns that other people have. And there's another way that you can use your transition monitoring team, and that is when you're about to put out some kind of communication about the change, you run it by the transition monitoring team so they can say, look, that's not going to fly in my department, or that's not going to work. The union workers aren't going to like that, whoever their audience are. And you can work with them to craft your message in a way that more people will accept.
The important piece of that is, and you can't include everybody, but you have to include representative
Yes.
of everybody,
Yes.
right? The multiple levels become so important. So often leadership will make the decisions and it'll just be communicated as directives, right? And there isn't an opportunity for people to provide feedback. And if you want to have you want buy-in, right? Ultimately, what you're looking for is buy-in. And so giving people the opportunity to be heard and the opportunity to contribute becomes a, a what's the term? It is I'm just gonna say it is a huge key, right? That's not the phrase that I'm looking for. I'm looking for something else. But it becomes an important part of the process because people then know that or feel that I had something to say, I had something to contribute, I had a concern, whatever it was, they it was heard. And it's a two-way street. It's two-way communication. It's communication, right? It's not a monologue in one direction and like this is what it is and take it or leave it. If you want, right? If you want that buy-in and you want to get to there's an underlying assumption in this conversation and generally all our conversations that you want the best culture possible, right? And therefore you are not treating your organization or your specific team like your own kingdom, a fiefdom, and you're just, barking orders at people. But that while you still have ultimate decision making power, that you are taking input, feedback, etc., and making the best decisions, and then communicating why you've made the decisions that you've made. When people have offered up ideas, solutions, their innovation and creativity, the things that you've taken, why did you take them? Why did you not include whatever the other things were? And so it becomes a part of letting your people know that you really are a team. You are a team. And so that group that you're talking about becomes really important, and making sure that it's representative. Again, you can't, depending on the size of your organization, maybe some organizations can, small enough where they can. But as you continue to grow, it's not going to be it's not going to be possible to have everyone in every meeting. And so it's representative, and the people that you have are the ones that are going out, communicating out, and then bringing impact and feedback back to you.
Yeah, two more points I want to make, because this comes up when I talk about the transition monitoring team. This is not a secret society. The organization should know who these people are and what their jobs are. Okay, so you're not trying to do this in secret. So this is part of being transparent. So you need to let the organization know that we're putting together this team, and this is the job of this team. This is why this team is important, because we want to know the information. We want to know how you feel about it. And also, you don't want to have a bunch of people on there that agree with everything that you say. You need to have, if you have that naysayer, include them in that transition monitoring team, because they're going to create a good counterbalance. It's going to help get rid of groupthink when that pops up. And you never know, that person may, even though they, I was going to say maybe annoying, they will bring up some really good points.
Yeah.
So you want to have even the naysayers, or put them, one or two of them on the team too. You certainly don't want to have a cabal of these two people that always agree on the same thing and fight the change. But you want to have those people that have opposing views as well.
Such a good point. Such a good point. Awesome. So final words as we start to wrap this up.
Yeah, I'm going to let you talk first, and I'm going to look something up because I want to make sure I'm being very clear when I say this, because there's a very good phrase that William Bridges uses that I want to leave the audience with.
Okay. I guess my final thoughts is that this is Robert mentioned when we were studying these change. We're studying change and various change models. This resonated with me as well. I think this is sort of the natural way I have approached change. And so it was easy to understand, and it's very easy to communicate. I use it with my clients all the time. I don't say, we're going to talk about the William Bridges model now, but we talk about this, particularly the identity of who it is that you are becoming. As I work with people who are transitioning often into leadership or into entrepreneurship, and recognizing that change, that going from what you were doing before, and this is a change that they desire, that there's still going to be some fear around it, right? They're still going, so even when it's something that you want, there's going to be that sense of loss and confusion. And what do I do? You may not have the anger and the denial part, but there the other emotions that are attended, and to be okay with feeling what you feel, right? And as a leader with a team, be okay with your people feeling what they feel. And if you can explain to them what it is they're going to experience, how they are, the things they are likely to feel, possibly can feel, help them understand the process, then people are not caught off guard. And a lot of what happens in change is people don't know why they're reacting the way that they're reacting. And people in leadership are upset with them for acting that way. So it is, I think, incumbent upon you to be an effective leader, to understand the process, the emotions, some of the suggestions that Robert has made in particular, of how to navigate this, to understand that so that you can communicate this with your people to help them make the transition and move from that letting go phase into really embracing and stepping boldly into the new beginning.
Fantastic. So my final words on this is, in the book, William Bridges uses some quotes from people about change, and this one is from Jessamine West, who was an American writer. And the quote is, "Nothing is so dear as what you are about to leave." And that really sums up the endings phase. Think about that. You may have hated that program, but now that you have to learn something new, boy, it's looking pretty good. Or think about being in, if you were divorced, if you've been through a divorce, you certainly have those melancholy feelings about, breaking off that relationship, maybe. Leaving home for college, leaving your old employer, you'll have those bittersweet thoughts about, there were some good times here, now it's time to move on. So nothing is so dear as what you are about to leave. That really sums up that endings phase of transition.
That is so good. And I'll just say, take that, right? Take your experiences outside of your organization, right? That what you've learned about yourself and how you have navigated change and transitions, and bring that to bear when you are communicating with your people, right? You don't need like for like examples in order to let people know what's going on. Use the experiences that you have. Every experience is a learning experience, and you can use that to help people to understand and to process what they're going through. So,
great.
With that, we want to thank you for joining us for this episode of The State of Leadership, Simple and Beyond. We've got a change for you right now in a transition. We're going to end this episode and move on to something else. So we don't want you to feel any fear, loss, or confusion right? Because we're going to be back. We're here on Thursdays, 3 p.m. Eastern, 12 noon Pacific. And if you are watching us on YouTube, hit the like button, subscribe, and share. If you are watching on LinkedIn or Facebook, please like, and feel free to leave comments, even when you're watching the replay. So, Robert, if someone is going through some challenges and needed some help navigating their own changes, how might they connect with you and get some help?
Sure, they can reach out to me directly at inspire me at roberthilliardcoaching.com, or they can go to Robert Hilliard Coaching and fill out that communication form there, and we can set up a discovery call and we can talk about how we can work together.
Awesome. And if you want to reach out to me, you can do so at shiftingintoaction.now.site, shiftingintoaction.now.site. We appreciate that. And just want to say we had another comment. And Mercedes, I want to thank you for being here with us live and sharing your thoughts along the way. Look forward to seeing you next time. So again, we are here Thursdays, 12 noon Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern, talking all things leadership. If there's a topic that you would like for us to cover, please drop a note and let us know. Or if you are interested, if you're a leader and you would like to be on the program and talk about your leadership journey, we would love to have you on. Reach out to Robert or I, and let's make that happen for you. So until next time, take care.
Bye now.